Hello, everyone. This is the Old Bear from the Old Bear's Den of Bigfoot. Tonight we got a story from coming out of Pennsylvania. It's kind of a long one, so we're going to get right straight into this story. And it starts right out. This is the account of the Bigfoot. Comes out of Pennsylvania. It's from Western Pennsylvania. This lady has known about Bigfoot since childhood. She went camping at Beaver Creek State Park in about 1969. She didn't know exactly what these creatures were back then. She did not know to. She did know not to upset them. Upset them. There were days they could run along the trails and play, and but then there was days that they couldn't because these things would be out roaming around and scaring the kids off and everything off the trails. Sometimes they could go swimming, but then there was days they had to hang around camp all day. It felt like she said it felt like walking around on eggshells while they were out camping. Didn't know what they could do one day to the next. She said one day she took her younger brother and sister down a trail that was off limits according to their parents. The name of the trail was Gray's Lock, and they wanted to go look at some turtles in the creek. But once they got there, they found out that the turtles that were there are not the ones you can catch. Wouldn't be a good thing to do. So they went ahead and walked on down the trail for about another mile or so, and she started hearing something following them on the hillside. Said she would stop and tell her brother and sister to stop also and not make no noise, and the sounds would stop. She said the sounds were coming from about halfway up the hillside. They decided to keep on going down the trail to see if they could get a look at the other wildlife, deers and whatever else was back there that time, turkey and stuff like that, and squirrels, and just want just explore. Uh, and while they were at this age, they were taught by their mother how to be quiet in the woods and what in the woods could hurt them. And mom also taught them that about the plants and stuff that were good for them. For bug bites or stings or anything of that nature, what plants to get a hold of to make the sting stop hurting. And at this time, she heard some more noises on the hillside, and she went charging up the hillside towards the sounds. That's brave. 11, 12 years old and brave like that. They were behaving. They weren't doing anything wrong, and it made her mad that someone was watching them. At first, she couldn't see anyone, so she flopped down on the ground and started looking underneath the underbrush. She got to see the biggest pair of brown hair covered legs and feet she had ever seen in her entire life. The legs looked like two tree trunks covered in hair. She jumped up and run and slid down the hill, yelling at her brother and sister at this point to run back towards the camp. Those kids ran all the way back to camp, and she said this thing ran off uphill. After this sighting, she and her siblings hung close to camp. She accepted the no-play zones that the monsters created, and that's all they knew to call them back then was monsters. Still to this day, she hasn't forgiven Bigfoot for ruining her time out camping. The park rangers in that campground never once said anything about them, nor did anyone till Money Moocher, and we all know who that is, decided they were there. All the kids knew that Bigfoot was there. Nobody there went missing as far as she knew. The group there did tear up some trailers and scared people. Um, Fast forward to, she's over 18 and she's dating. She met the man that was going to become her husband, and they got on the subject about Bigfoot one evening, and they were talking about it. And he admitted to knowing that there was Bigfoot because at a friend's hunting camp northeast of Sheffield, Ohio, they had one roaming around. He said it was a nice one, and he didn't believe her telling of her experiences with the aggressive ones. So on one of their first dates, she talked him into going to the area of Dogwood Trail in the state park, Beaver Creek, to show him what they can be like. He believed they were all shy, but after a few minutes of being on the trail, he pulls her arm and swings her around and leads her back down the trail. He leans in close and says, "We're leaving." He looks her right in the eye and says, "Those will hurt you." Her boyfriend slash future husband speculated that it may have been due to inbreeding. After a heated discussion, they got out of there and went back to the car, and from that point on, he believed what she said. Fast forward to after they're married, and they bought a home in western Pennsylvania. They kind of noticed a few things around the house would disappear or get moved around outside. Like her husband would have tools out there doing a project or something of that nature, and they would he'd always left his tools right there wherever he was working, and next day he'd have to play find a wrench or find a screwdriver or a pipe wrench or whatever he was working with. He'd have to go looking all over the yard to find them. Of course, the kids got blamed for this a lot of times, but the kids always said, "Hey, we didn't do that. We had nothing to do with that. We know better to touch Dad's stuff." After some time, they began to notice that their inside cats and dogs, they let them out in the evenings to go out to the bathroom or any time during the day, and she said it always seemed to happen late, in the afternoon, late evening, right before dark, when they let the dogs out or the cats out to go out for a little while. They didn't want to go out. They never heard any vocals, like the whoops or screams, during the day or night or anything. And so at least that was a good thing. They had to explain it to the kids. And then around 2007, she started to notice some more things, like a neighbor that lived just down the street from him that complained that kids were out behind his concrete garage, smacking the backside of his concrete garage at night and making other noises. He always complained these kids were doing it while barefoot in the cold weather. So evidently they were hanging around his place and it was cold. One night she took him home in March at about 10 p.m. They heard a daytime bird peep. It would peep and then stop, and then peep again and stop again, peep again and stop again. Well, daytime birds don't peep at night. They're asleep. So that was kind of strange. Then about summertime, she started noticing some other things, like they were always getting the feeling when they were outside at night or in the daytime like they were being watched. It got to the point where they never wanted to be outside after dark anymore. Her husband had went out and bought some heavy curtains and installed them on all the windows except the one in the bathroom where they took showers and stuff, because it was up there pretty high and he didn't think anything about it. He then put up another outside light. While he was off work for getting hurt at work, and it must have been really important because that kind of strenuous labor, putting up the curtains and then also putting up the curtain rods and everything for the curtains, uh, would take a lot out of him because he was hurt. So through this time, his health, started getting worse after you put up the curtains and put up the outside light, and she was working. She was always at work. Daylight. She'd leave before daylight and get home at dark, and she was always tired. And I guess they, after a while, they got kind of in an argument about something, and she described it pretty much as a blow up. So she moved outside to their camper that they had there in their driveway. Well, about 15 feet from the camper was this line of cedar trees that are kind of part of the story that I'm going to give you now. They're important for later on, so hold that in your mind. She said she wasn't going to move back in the house until he apologized. So she was staying put. And during their separation, things got a little bit weirder. She said the camper would get smacked at night, and she just kind of blew it off as her husband, trying to get her to scare her to get her to come inside. She said during this time, the outside lights would come on and off all night long. And after a short period of time of probably about 3 months or so, she moved out in the camper in November, and I'd say probably around January, maybe the middle of January, she got a thing of smell-o-vision. Pretty stinky smell coming from, that she smelt there in the camper, and it wasn't, the sewage or anything in the camper, and she wasn't even using the camper for that. She was, anyway, she went to work and was talking to a friend of hers, and they came up with, her friend told her, said coyotes stink, so she believed that it might be coyotes. So she thought, there might be coyotes there, and at that time there weren't any bears around her home, or they didn't have any trouble with any bears. There weren't none. They had nobody that ever reported seeing a bear in that area, so she didn't have to worry about that. But she's thinking, coyotes, they're not going to bother you. But at this point, she's using a pail at night, and everybody can guess why. But she would get up in the morning if, after getting this smelly stench coming into the camper at night, or wake up or open the front door and that smell would be outside. She would announce to the world that she had a pail full of liquid and wasn't afraid to use it. She had no qualms about throwing it on a coyote or whatever else came through, and but at this time they had the smell going on, and she's out in the camper, but they still didn't have any vocals or didn't have no screams or whoops or whatever. Around March is when she moved back into the house, and she said the vocals kicked off and kicked right straight into high gear. She said she didn't care about all the screaming and stuff, just as long as they were, as long as the Bigfoot stayed in the woods and stayed out of her yard, she was fine with it. Then she started finding footprints. The first one she found was there at the kitchen window. which was behind some shrubs that they had planted there next to the kitchen window, and if and they were pretty tall, and if you stood right in between the two big shrubs that was on each side of the window, or just behind them, you could see right straight in the window, and nobody would notice you out there unless somebody shined a flashlight out the window, and the kitchen window was head high from the inside of the house. But then she started finding some other things, and uh, she also found some X's over behind the grapevine that was near her shed, and she found imprints in her side garden. And then after this happened, she was in the kitchen one day and got screamed at from the back porch, right off the back porch. And the funny thing is, she had one of her girlfriends on the phone and had it on speakerphone, and a girlfriend heard it too. And she heard the scream, full volume, no trouble. Then things start going missing off the front porch, and then some of them would get returned, a few days later, and then she had grandchildren by this point in time, and this is the part that really made her mad and upset her quite a bit. Her grandson was over at the house staying with grandma and grandpa, and one of these big ugly Bigfoot that she said must have been inbreds screamed and outside the house, and it scared her grandson so bad that he cried for most of the night. And once she finally got him calmed down, he told Mama that she has cavemen in her backyard. Well, that meant grandson ain't coming back. It scared him that bad. He does, to this day, he still doesn't like going over to his grandma's house. Uh, at this time, it got to the point they would scream at her coming and going to work. The house slapping was still going on, and she was getting charged when she was coming home at night. Not every time, but quite a bit. Then this is the thing that really kind of tells you where they were at in their process of uh, bothering this woman. And she said one night there was one standing right outside her front window under the light, and she said it scared her silly. She described it as about 8 or 9 foot tall, with brownish hair all over, had a rounded head with a Neanderthal brow line. She said it was definitely a male. She said it was cold outside, but you could still tell it was a male. Uh, she said the face on this thing looked like it was a worried puppy dog, and all the while it was standing there and she was standing there looking at it, its left hand was constantly twitching, like a real nervous twitch. And she said this is the point she came unglued. She was screaming in her head at this thing, all the while in her night clothes, because she was going to bed at this time. She was standing there with one leg up in the air, because she was in mid step. It froze her in place. Sometime later, she got mad one night after all this stuff had been going on. She got tired of uh, her trying to let her dogs out and they wouldn't go out, or the cats out and they wouldn't go out, and so she started carrying her husband's gun, her husband's rifle, to the back door when she would let the dogs go out. And she may or may not have screamed this. She thinks she did. She's not sure because there was no one there besides her husband, which was already in bed at this time. His health had started deteriorating. And she was, she screamed out, "Let us alone and stop the crap, or I will call researchers here and they will have guns and cameras all over this hill." Short time after that, her husband passed away. But these Bigfoot just kept going on and on, just same as always, trying to scare her to death. And she's getting older at this point in time, and it's just, they were just making a general nuisance of themselves. Things still disappear. They would scream at the end of the yard at night, and they were getting into the guard, their planters, and they had a garden and was taking food out of it, and stuff that she would grow, it would disappear, and they would destroy plants in the garden and everything else. Uh, during the whole time her husband was alive and they were having a garden, they was taking everything out of the garden. So she got pretty upset with him, after her husband passed away, and they just kept right on going. Right after her husband passed away, she temporarily lost her eyesight and had to call in a friend to help her out. And she said the whole time that she had to wait on her friend to get there after her husband passed away, she was trapped inside. She couldn't get out. She couldn't see real good. She would, whenever she did get outside, in the middle of the day, she couldn't see the ground real well, and couldn't tell, the differences in the ground, or if it was a step. She couldn't tell how far to raise her leg up, and it would cause her to fall a lot. And so pretty much they kept her trapped inside the whole time because she couldn't go outside unless somebody came over. Um, After about 18 months of being blind in one eye, and she finally got her full eyesight back, and she wanted revenge, for all the times they kept her trapped inside. So she went out and she bought one of those tree faces, those scary faces you can put up in a tree, and bought two black horsetails, and got a ladder out, and she had a big apple tree out there in her backyard out next to the shed, and it was probably 6 foot in diameter, and about 12 feet high or 14 foot high or something like that. She took and put that face up there and nailed those two horsetails around it to, it was a pretty scary face, she said, and nailed it to the tree, or put it up in a tree at about 12 foot high. She said maybe a night later or 2 nights later, she said it worked. And as they, she was inside, she heard a massive scream from one of these Bigfoot. And she said it was a very satisfying feeling that came over her. The only thing is, though, is the next day she went outside, and the apple tree was ripped up out of the ground. The roots were still on it, and it wasn't pushed over. It was ripped up and thrown from where they ripped it out of the ground. She said they took them 3 days of cutting it up. With her sons and her daughters came over and were helping mom get all cleaned up out of the yard. And she said it was still satisfying until her daughter asked her, said, "Mom, so how's that pissing contest going?" Her mom just kind of looked at her and gave her a mother look, and her daughter left it alone. But she said it was all worth it to her to get back at these things for all these years of, ever since she was a child of probably 9, 10 years old, maybe 11 or 12. I think it was 11 or 12 years old, until she's now in her uh, well, we're gonna leave her age out of it. She is a lady, and I appreciate her bringing me this story. And ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude this video. And we appreciate y'all coming and watching. And we're going to have another long story this weekend on Discord. And if you get a chance, uh, we did I made up a shirt on Teespring. It's not much. It's just my rendition of a 9 foot tall Bigfoot something that was close to 9 foot tall, I think. I didn't get a tape measure out and measure it, but we did a shirt on Teespring. And if you get a chance, go over there and look at it. Look underneath Old Bear's Den of Bigfoot, and you'll see the shirt. It's not the best in the world. I'm not a great drawer, but I did the best I could, guys and gals. So if you like it, that's fine. If you don't, no problem. Anyway, we're glad you came and glad you listened to the story tonight. And we'll catch you all later. Y'all have a wonderful and blessed night. And if we don't get to talk to you before Christmas, may you have a Merry Christmas. And may the Lord bless you beyond your belief. And we're done.